Over the holidays, I've also had a chance to reflect and have had long talks with my family about our future. Throughout the course of my career, any success I have personally achieved has been because of their support and with their encouragement. So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
This is my video update on this Monday afternoon, January the 6th, coming to you from Athens, Greece. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with a big possible Elensky curse. Maybe the biggest of all Elensky curses. Rumor has it, and I believe this is much more than a rumor, even Reuters is reporting this, that Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is going to resign. Trudeau is expected to resign by Wednesday. Maybe by the time this video goes up, he will have resigned. Maybe tomorrow he's going to resign. But the reports are that by Wednesday afternoon, Trudeau will, I don't want to say he will no longer be Prime Minister of Canada, because that's not really what I think is happening, but he will announce his resignation. Now, what's the angle in all of this for Trudeau and for the Liberals? He's going to resign, but from what I understand, he will remain as the caretaker Prime Minister until the Liberal Party can get a new leader and a new government in place, if they can do this. So Trudeau will resign. He will remain as the interim caretaker Prime Minister. The Liberal Party then will look to replace Trudeau and to stay in power. Am I seeing this correctly? Is this what's going on, or am I totally freaking wrong about this? I don't know. But this is what I believe is happening, at least from what I've read and what I've understood. This is what's at play here. The Liberals, the Liberal Party, trying to remain in power, and it seems as if the only way they can remain in power, avoid snap elections, which they were going to lose because the polling was not very good for the Liberals and for Trudeau. So the way they stay in power is to finally get Trudeau to step down. They try to form a new government, and they try to hold on for a little bit longer. And they avoid snap elections, which was most likely going to happen because there is no confidence in Trudeau. I think that's what's happening here, but I could be completely wrong. And if I'm completely wrong about this, then oh well. Let's get to the next news topic. Let's talk about the next news topic. But whatever happens, if with Canadian politics, whatever's at play here, palace intrigue and whatever's going on, one thing's for sure: if Trudeau does step down this by Wednesday or this week, then this is a big Elensky curse. This is a big Elensky curse. Biden was a big Elensky curse. Schultz, a big Elensky curse. Trudeau, it is a whopper of an Elensky curse, man. Big balls, Trudeau. Hey, Olaf, guess what? I'm also out of a job. Let's go hang out. Trudeau, you idiot. We've just been Elensky cursed. Oh man, oh man. Yeah, Elensky cursed. So yesterday when I was doing my video up at the church, which is just down that way, I was talking about the Austrian Prime Minister Nehammer getting Elensky cursed. Nehammer got the hammer, and the Elensky hammer. And I said in that video, Trudeau, you're next. And then the church bell's starting to ring. What's going on? What is going on? Anyway, let's move on to the next news topic. And the next news topic is Elensky. Elensky and his interview with LEX Fridman. Let's see, the LEX Fridman 3-hour Elensky interview. Does this surprise anyone that LEX Fridman got a 3-hour interview with Elensky? No, doesn't surprise me. This is a friendly fire interviewer for Elensky. There was no way that Elensky was going to do an interview with someone like Tucker Carlson. At least I don't think Elensky would be able to do an interview with Tucker Carlson, because that would be a tough interview. I would expect it to be a tough interview. I would expect Tucker Carlson to ask some very uncomfortable questions. But with LEX Fridman, he hasn't hidden the fact that he's very pro-Ukraine, and he hasn't hidden the fact that he's very pro-Elensky. He even said in the interview, multiple times in the interview, how much he admires Elensky, how much respect he has for Elensky. They were even talking about love. They were joking around, but they were talking about about love and all of these emotions. But yeah, this was a very friendly podcast for Elensky to be on. If there was one podcast that Elensky was going to do, it was going to be LEX Fridman, long form English language podcast, even though they didn't speak in English. But LEX Fridman is the podcast for Elensky to do. And I don't quite agree with LEX Fridman saying in the podcast how much he admires Elensky. He called him charming. He said he's charismatic. He's very persuasive. In a political interview, I don't think you should tell the politician, even if you do admire that politician, I don't think you should tell that politician how much you admire him or her. Maybe that works when you're interviewing Bezos or the Zuckbot. You can say how much you admire them and how cool they are. But if you're doing a political interview, it's probably best not to say that stuff during the interview. That's just my own personal opinion. Anyway, let's talk about the language. Let's talk about the language of the podcast, because when I first saw the podcast, I have my YouTube settings to language settings to American English, US English. And when I first started watching the podcast, hearing the podcast, I was a bit confused, freaked out, because I was watching Elensky's mouth move, and I was watching LEX Fridman's mouth move, their lips move. But what I was listening to was not matching up with what I was seeing. And then LEX Fridman, about a third into the podcast, talked about the fact that he's using some AI technology, which overdubs, or dubs over, I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, the voices of himself and Elensky into the language that you select, English, Russian, Ukrainian, whatever, with the voice of Elensky and LEX Fridman. So I was listening to Elensky speak in English in his Elensky voice, but it was really off. And I understood that's not Elensky. That's not Elensky speaking English, but it's Elensky's voice. And I was saying the same about LEX Fridman. It was LEX Fridman's voice speaking English, but it wasn't matching his lips moving. And that's when it all clicked. And I was saying, okay, so this is an AI technology. It was creepy. It was really weird and really creepy listening to an Elensky English which was not really Elensky's English in Elensky's voice. Podolyak, this AI technology, really cool, eh? This sounds like me. This English is like my English. Maybe a little bit better than my English, eh, Podolyak? This AI, very cool stuff, Lex. Anyway, yeah, so that kind of freaked me out a bit. But if you choose, from what I understand, actually from what I did, if you go to YouTube and select English UK, then you get the real interview with no AI, no dubbing, overdub, whatever it's called, none of that. That's when you get the real interview, the real Elensky voice, the real Lex Fridman voice. Lex Fridman did most of the interview, if not all the interview, in Russian. And I believe he is Ukrainian. Lex Fridman is Ukrainian, but he doesn't speak Ukrainian. He speaks Russian. And Elensky had issues with that. So Elensky tries to do the interview in Ukrainian, but many times he reverted back to Russian. And then he also tried to use his very, very broken English. And boy, was Elensky cursing a lot. He was cursing a whole lot. It was really bad. Really embarrassing, actually. If I was interviewing Elensky and he was cursing like that, I would be, oh my God, I would just have my head down. Man, this guy, this is the president of a country, I would say, because he was cursing. He was very aggressive. He was cursing a whole lot. And it was just not very, I want to say not very professional, but it was very unbecoming of a president or a prime minister of any country to be cursing that much, even if it is a podcast. So anyway, that's the language stuff. By the way, speaking about the language stuff, when Lex Fridman said that it would be better if they both spoke in Russian, it would be a much more fluid, more comfortable interview, and he's right, because Elensky's fluent, his native language, his fluent language is Russian. Lex Fridman obviously speaks very good, if not fluent Russian. So it would have made the podcast a lot smoother. Elensky said, I'm not going to speak Russian because I despise the Russian language. I despise the Russian people. So he said that. But anyway, the purpose of the interview. What was the purpose of the interview? I think it was pretty easy to understand or sniff out what the purpose of this interview was all about. And this interview was about Trump. That's what this interview was about. It was about Trump, and it was about getting Trump bogged down in Project Ukraine, appealing to Trump, appealing to America first, putting this interview out there, Elensky given this platform so he can make an appeal to Trump, to the American people, to stay committed to Project Ukraine. And Elensky revealed what his ultimate goal is in this interview. I mean, he just said it. He said it. The ultimate goal is for Ukraine to speak to the United States, for Elensky to engage with Trump when Trump becomes president in a couple of weeks, for them to sit down, to discuss, to negotiate, to come up with a plan that they both agree on, and then take that plan to Putin. That's what Elensky wants to have happen. He wants to sit down with Trump. They want to come up with a plan for Ukraine and then take that plan and deliver it to Putin. And he said as much during the interview. That's what this interview was really all about. And that's why Elensky was kissing Trump's butt big time. I mean, he was really kissing Trump's butt throughout this interview. He was kind of crapping on Biden, to be quite honest. I got the sense that Elensky was saying, you know what, we're done with Biden. He's leaving in a couple of weeks. Go away, Professor Biden. We're done with you. Trump's our guy. Trump is awesome. Trump's the man. Trump is strong. Trump is cool. Whatever Trump says, the world listens. Whatever Trump says, the Europeans listen. When I talk to Trump, the Europeans call me and they want to know, what did Trump say to me? Trump is our guy. So Trump, give me a call. Hey, Trump, give me a call. Give me a call. We sit down. We come up with peace formula. and then we take it to Putin and we give Putin a type of ultimatum. That was the interview. That was the main goal, the main purpose of the interview. And it's no coincidence. I don't believe it's a coincidence that you have this interview scheduled for the day it was scheduled. Orthodox Christmas tomorrow. You have the latest offensive into Kursk, and Trump is going to be president in a couple of weeks. Biden is gone. The timing lines up. Keir Starmer said that by the end of the month, he's also going to go to the United States and he's going to demand of Trump that he stay committed to Project Ukraine. That's what Keir Starmer is saying. So I think all of this lines up. The goal of the collective West globalists, the EU, NATO, along with Elensky, their goal is to keep Trump invested, bogged down in Project Ukraine, and to prevent Trump from talking to Putin first. They don't want Trump sitting down with Putin without the Europeans, without Elensky, without NATO. That is their greatest fear, that Trump is going to sit down with Putin and the two adults, they're going to solve the Ukraine conflict. That's the last thing they want to see happen. That is why Elensky is always saying how Putin is afraid of Trump. Putin is afraid of Trump. So Trump needs to speak with me, and we need to leverage that fear. That's why he keeps on going on and on about that, how Putin is afraid of Trump. He doesn't want Putin to sit down with Trump. No one in the collective West wants that, the collective West leadership. So that was, in my opinion, the purpose of this entire interview. Now let's talk about what I consider to be the three big lies in this interview. Lies that LEX Fridman did not push back on, nor did he even grasp or understand. No fault of his own. He's not a political or geopolitical guy. That's not his podcast. That's not his wheelhouse. From what I understand, he's tech and AI and social media and stuff like that. But anyway, he got the interview, and of course it's about geopolitics and politics. And the first big lie, which is something that LEX Fridman brought up, which I found kind of amazing, was when he actually said to Elensky that no one controls him. And how did Elensky get the upper hand on the oligarchs? And how is Elensky president of Ukraine without having anyone controlling him? There is no puppet master to Elensky the puppet, according to LEX Fridman. And I believe that anyone that has been following Project Ukraine for the last 3 years, and even before that, probably laughed out loud at that entire exchange. that they want to tell us, LEX Fridman and Elensky, you guys want to tell us that no one controls Elensky? No one controls Elensky? Really? Just the fact that they're talking about the U.S. being the key to negotiating Project Ukraine is proof of the fact that the U.S. controls Elensky. Absolutely. So the whole thing just makes no sense. Just the fact that they're talking about Trump and how the U.S. is going to be the only country that can solve the conflict in Ukraine, at least for Ukraine. They're the only ones that can help Ukraine out of a defeat, a military defeat, is proof of the fact that the United States controls Elensky. Look at what he's wearing for the past 3 years, for God's sakes. He's been wearing green for 3 years because the scriptwriters told him to wear green. Come on, man. So anyway, that was just a whopper of a lie. Big time lie. Now, the second big lie was the Budapest Memorandum. I've talked about this 1,000 times. We've talked about this on the Duran 1,000 times. But once again, Elensky talked about the Budapest Memorandum and security guarantees, and how Ukraine had the ultimate security guarantee when they signed the Budapest Memorandum. And there were states that guaranteed the memorandum, not a treaty, a memorandum. But Ukraine was betrayed, and they had their nukes, and then their nukes were taken away from them, and then Russia started hostilities with Ukraine. That's the narrative that Elensky once again repeated in this interview, and there was no pushback from LEX Fridman. No pushback. He didn't understand the Budapest Memorandum. I've said this 1,000 times. I'll say it once more, very quickly. Ukraine never had nuclear weapons. The USSR had nuclear weapons. Those nuclear weapons were Russia's nuclear weapons when the USSR dissolved. When the USSR dissolved, when it was no more, those nuclear weapons were Russia's. And every country in the world agreed to that. Every country agreed to that. And all the technology and all the operations, all the know-how, all the military personnel were in Moscow. They were not in Ukraine that were able to manage, to operate, to control those nuclear weapons. They were never Ukraine's to begin with. There were nuclear weapons from the USSR in Ukraine. They were in Belarus. I believe they were also in Kazakhstan. But when the USSR was no more, everyone agreed, Russia being the successor state of the USSR, that was what was agreed upon. And all the know-how of the nuclear weapons, all the management of the nuclear weapons was in Moscow anyway. That is who needs to take care of these nukes. There was no debate about this at the time. None whatsoever. And we've talked about this many, many times about the nuclear weapons and the Budapest Memorandum that Elensky and the collective West goes on and on about, and how they were cheated out of nuclear weapons. They were never your nuclear weapons. Never, ever, ever, never, 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 ever, ever. Sorry, Miss Jackson. Yeah, and the Budapest Memorandum, just one more point on the Budapest Memorandum. It actually had a clause in the Budapest Memorandum which said that no countries would interfere in Ukraine's sovereignty. It said that. Actually, that was a pretty major clause of the Budapest Memorandum. All the countries that signed up to the Budapest Memorandum agreed that Ukraine would remain neutral, which in 2008, Bush said Ukraine's going to get into NATO. So right there, the Budapest Memorandum was kind of over. But the 2014 coup was absolutely interference in Ukraine and interference in Ukraine's neutrality and in Ukraine's government. It was an illegal coup of a democratically elected, internationally recognized government, which was carried out by the United States and by the European Union. So that broke the Budapest Memorandum right then and there. Lex Fridman didn't mention any of this stuff. I don't even think he knows about this stuff. He just let Elensky go on and on about nuclear weapons, and we were cheated out of nukes. And if we had those nukes today, then Russia would not have invaded. That's his argument. So now we need the United States and Ukraine. That's his argument. Because we were cheated out of nukes, now the U.S. has to protect us. That was what Elensky was saying, and it's wrong. It's a lie. It is 100% a lie. So let's get to the third and final lie in this interview. How am I doing on time? All right, let's speed this up. And it has to do with the Minsk agreement. Now, Elensky was very sneaky here when he was talking about the Minsk agreement. He and me and Alexander did a video on this, and Alexander figured this out. So definitely watch the video that is going up on the Duran where we talk about this, because Alexander figured this out. And I'm just going to repeat much of what Alexander said in that Duran video, and I'm going to put my own style and my own spin to it, my own understanding of it. But Elensky said to Lex Fridman that in 2019, he called Putin many times, hundreds of times, he said, and he tried to negotiate between Ukraine and Russia. He tried to negotiate Minsk. And he tried to negotiate a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia based on Minsk. Now, this is not a lie. It's not a lie, but it is misleading. Elensky's very manipulative, very manipulative. And I didn't even catch this at first until Alexander, in the video that we did on the Duran, he figured this out. He caught this, and he figured out the manipulation from Elensky. He saw right through it. So here it is. Elensky, he wasn't lying when he said that he was calling Putin and urging Putin for a negotiation between Russia and Ukraine in relation to the Minsk agreement. But the trick, the manipulation here, the key here is that the Minsk agreement, and he was saying how Putin was refusing this. So he makes Putin out to be a villain. Putin was refusing Elensky's calls to negotiate on Minsk, Russia and Ukraine. But the key here is that the Minsk agreement was not an agreement between Russia and Ukraine. It wasn't between Russia and Ukraine. The Minsk agreement was between Ukraine and Donbass. It was between Ukraine and Donbass. It was an agreement it was an internal conflict. That was how the agreement was framed. That was the makeup of the agreement. It wasn't an agreement between Ukraine and another state. It was framed as an agreement and a disagreement with a resolution contained in Minsk between Ukraine and the East. What Russia was in relation to the Minsk agreement was no different than what France and Germany was. They were guarantors of the Minsk agreement. They were there at the signing. They were guaranteeing the Minsk agreement. They were going to make sure that East Ukraine, the Donbass, and Ukraine, Kiev, were going to honor the Minsk agreement. So Russia, France, and Germany, they had the same responsibility in terms of the Minsk agreement to make sure that it was carried through and it was enforced. But Elensky, as he was talking to LEX Fridman, he was saying, I wanted to negotiate with Putin, Ukraine, and Russia. Russia said no. Russia was telling Elensky many times, no. Your negotiation in terms of Minsk is not with us. Your negotiation is with the Donbass. And that's where Ukraine constantly refused to negotiate with the Donbass. They refused it. Poroshenko refused it, and Elensky refused it. And what they were trying to do, most likely on the orders of Macron, it's believed that this is what Macron told Elensky to do, is they were trying to take it away from Donbass, and they were trying to move Minsk towards a dispute between Russia and Ukraine. That's how Macron wanted to frame it. They wanted to move away from Minsk and turn it into a dispute between one state, Ukraine, and another state, Russia. And Russia, they caught on to this. They knew what they were up to, what Macron and what Ukraine, Elensky were up to. And every time Elensky wanted to negotiate Minsk or talk about a ceasefire with Putin, with Russia, Putin's reply to Elensky was, this is not about us. You need to talk to Donbass. That's who you need to talk to, because that's what the Minsk agreement is about. It is Donbass and Ukraine, not Ukraine and Russia. So very sneaky on Elensky's part. What he was saying was not a lie. I tried to call Putin many, many times. I tried to negotiate with Putin many, many times based on Minsk, Ukraine and Russia. But that was misleading. You refused to negotiate with Donbass, which is what the Minsk agreement told you to do. And it should have been enforced by France and Germany. Negotiate with Donbass, call Donbass, talk to them, enforce the Minsk agreement. That is what Germany and France should have told Poroshenko, and that's what they should have told Elensky, but they didn't. Because Merkel said it many, many times. We had no intention of doing that, because what we wanted to do was buy time so that we can arm Ukraine so that they could be ready for a conflict with Russia. Merkel said in about 3-4 interviews. Poroshenko said the same thing. He said that he had no intention of enforcing Minsk at all. And in recent interviews, he said that Minsk was all about buying time so that Ukraine can be armed to go to war with Russia. So those are the 3 big lies. Anyway, some other things that were said in this interview. Elensky talked about North Koreans burning faces, or Russia burning the faces of North Koreans. He said there are 12,000 North Koreans. Then he said there's maybe 50,000 North Koreans in Kursk. And then he even said there may be 500,000 North Koreans in Kursk, or maybe North Korea is going to send 500,000 soldiers to Kursk. But they burn their faces, Lex. They burn their faces, and we can't identify them. We can't make them out because their faces are burnt. So he said that. He said that the EU should buy all of its gas from the United States, because it's cheaper. LNG, US LNG, he said, is cheaper than Russian pipeline gas, even Russian gas that transits via Ukraine, and Ukraine gets money for. He said it's better that the EU buy US LNG because it's cheaper. That's a lie. U.S. LNG is not cheaper than Russian pipeline gas, but he said that in the interview. And then he said that this was an incredible statement from Elensky. He said that what Trump should do when they negotiate, when they talk, Elensky and Trump, and they work out their plan to take to Putin, he said what one thing that they should do is they should take the money, the Russian frozen assets, the stolen Russian frozen assets, the 300 billion. Elensky said what we should do is we should take that money, and then Ukraine can buy weapons from the United States using the 300 billion. Ukraine is happy, Trump is happy. He actually said that, man. And Lex Fridman didn't give any pushback, bro. I was just like, oh my God. Did you listen to what he just said? We're going to take stolen assets, frozen stolen assets from Russia, and we're going to use those assets for Ukraine to buy weapons for the United States. The U.S. is happy, Trump is happy, the military-industrial complex is happy, and we're also happy. 10% for the big guy. I don't know if that still holds when Biden's gone, but whatever. I couldn't believe he said that, man. Yeah, we're going to use Russia's frozen, stolen assets to buy weapons from the U.S. to please Trump. Man, that was something. That was something. What else? He made fun of Lukashenko. I mean, he tried to embarrass Lukashenko during the podcast. I thought that was interesting. And then he also hinted at breaking up Russia. He was trying to push the break up Russia narrative, and he was talking about Chechnya and how Russia wronged Chechnya, and Chechnya is not really Russian, and they're not part of the Russian Federation, and they shouldn't be part of the Russian Federation, and they're different people who speak a different language, and Russia's made up of a lot of different people who speak a lot of different languages, and they shouldn't be in the Russian Federation. He was trying to hint at what's best for the world is a breakup of Russia. So he was trying to take that line as well. Anyway, that's the interview. 3 hours. Watch it if you want. If you don't want, I don't really think you're missing anything, to be quite honest. But it was interesting. It was interesting to kind of watch, I guess. If you've been following the conflict as we have, then maybe it's worth watching some of the interview. Anyway, the Russian Ministry of Defense, they announced that Kurakovo has been fully liberated. This is the first statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense saying that Kurakovo is liberated. This is a big deal. This is a very, very big deal because it is the largest settlement in southwest Donbass, Kurakovo. So the timing of this interview, it was timed so that it distracts away from a big loss for the Ukraine military. The Kursk invasion part 2 debacle. It looks like this was a big catastrophe for the Ukraine military. The reports that we're getting is that the Russian military, they completely demolished the Ukraine forces that were trying to break through in Kursk. Break through to where? No one knows what the purpose of this was, why they're doing this, but it was catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. Now, it doesn't mean that part 2 of the Kursk incursion, maybe it's part 3, maybe it's part 4, I don't even know. I'll call it part 2 of the Kursk incursion. Doesn't mean that this is over. There are reports saying that maybe this is some sort of distraction and Ukraine's going to try to enter Russia in a different direction. I don't know, but at least this initial second or third incursion into Kursk ended up being a catastrophe for the Ukraine military. Even Mariana Bezuglaya, the Ukrainian MP, who's very critical of Elensky, she even said that this is a tragedy. She actually said that in her statement that the Ukraine military and Elensky, they're focusing on Kursk as Donbass is being overrun by Russia. She said that there are no defenses in Donbass, and the Ukraine military is wasting their time in Kursk, and this is all one big distraction. The Russians are taking control of our mineral resources, seizing abandoned fortifications that are convenient primarily for them, killing the military, advancing tens of kilometers deep into our land. Very soon, Pokrovsk Fortress which is not a fortress at all. But it seems that military and political priorities are not related to protecting the Dnieper Donetsk cluster of natural resources of Ukraine, saving cities and people, or reforming the army. The generals need to show another forward to prove to the political leadership their indispensability and ability to perfectly manage the armed forces of Ukraine. And then she goes on and on about how the military leadership, in a fairly long post, how the military leadership is active in Kursk as one big distraction. And they're abandoning Donetsk and Donbass and Pokrovsk, and the part of Ukraine that really should be the focus of the Ukraine military. So Stammer and Schultz, as I said, Stammer, he will be looking to get to the U.S. at the end of the month to try and convince Trump to continue to send weapons to Elensky and to back Ukraine. That is Stammer's number one priority. He has 1,000 other things that he should be worrying about, but nope, Stammer is worried about Project Ukraine. And so he's going to travel to the United States to try and convince Trump to stay committed to Project Ukraine. Yesterday, I talked about Schultz, and the reports were that Schultz wanted to go to Moscow to meet with Putin. Schultz is denying this. The pirate Schultz is saying, nope, this is not true. And even the Kremlin said they have not received a request from Germany for Schultz to travel to Moscow. So Germany's denying this report that Schultz wants to go to Moscow to meet with Putin. And the Kremlin is saying they haven't received any indication or any request for Schultz, for the pirate to set sail to Russia. So that's an update there. And let's do a clown world, and we will wrap this video up. ANNALENA handshake gate continues. ANNALENA handshake gate continues, and ANNALENA is even being made fun of by German media. They're making fun of ANNALENA and handshake gate in Syria during her trip to Syria. Everyone is having a laugh at the expense of ANNALENA Baerbock and the fact that Al-Qaeda, HTS al-Nusra head choppers did not want to shake her hand, even though she put her hand out there so she could shake their hand. They did not want to shake her hand. Everyone's making fun of her. Even her own German media is making fun of her. And this is the real clown world, Al-Qaeda, HTS al-Jolani, they are putting up photos on social media of the meeting with ANNALENA Baerbock and the French foreign minister. But in those photos, they're blurring out ANNALENA. They're blurring her out in the photos that they are publishing of the meeting with the German foreign minister and the French foreign minister. She's disappearing. She's being disappeared in the photos. There's a post on X which compares this to Back to the Future. I thought that was a good post from Bild. Syrian Islamists censor photos of Baerbock. That is what Bild put out. And the post from Isabel Oliveira said, it's Back to the Future. She's disappearing from the picture. Yeah, Back to the Future Part 2. Actually, Back to the Future Part 2. Where, was it Part 2 or was it Part 1? Oh no, it was Part 1. It wasn't Part 2. It was Back to the Future Part 2. Part 1, or maybe it was Part 2. I don't know. But yeah, the disappearing Marty McFly. The disappearing McFlies in Back to the Future. The disappearing ANNALENA Baerbocks. Oh my God. Well, that's what you wanted. You wanted Assad gone. Assad is gone, and now everyone is making fun of you, ANNALENA 360. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. That's the clown world. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch, like the long sleeve t-shirt I'm wearing in this video, and the bomber jacket that I'm wearing in this video. The link to the Duran shop is in the description box down below. Take care.